As the slide says, my name's Chase. I work for a ministry at Western Michigan University called Campus Outreach. Spend a lot of time with students, as I'll talk about here in a moment. The more interesting things about myself, though, are that I'm married to my wife, Jess, coming up on 7 years in May. And then even more interesting than that, we have 3 kids, all sharing the same birthday, because I have a 2.5-year-old son, and then I have twin daughters. They're about 5.5 months old. And so usually when I speak and I do things, I try not to wear khakis because my daughter, Jordan, has a superpower of throwing up all over my pants. And so I like to stand behind podiums. This morning, luckily, I got up a little bit before them, but I usually have to hold her out here like this so she doesn't get me. She has done that before, and it's really embarrassing. It looks like I peed myself. And so that's a little bit about me. And so talking about, young dads that have young kids, that's me. I do need some time off every once in a while. And so even last night, it was a late night to early morning, but it's good to be with you guys. I'm excited to talk about the topic and follow up kind of what Ian was getting at. Just as a way of following this, I don't have a slideshow, but I do have this little handout in your folder there. So you can follow along with that. It might be helpful. Even more helpful than probably some things I'll say are the resources I recommended. There's just a list of books there at the bottom of that page, recommended resources. And they're just going to say things that I say, except better, but longer, naturally, right? And so one of your questions might be, how does someone like me get a microphone with people who've written books, have PhDs, and all those things? I don't have any of that. I don't have a PhD. I don't have an MBA from an elite school. Not that I'm against those things. But what I do have is just countless hours with college students. Countless hours, 45 to 70 hours a week, depending on what time of the year it is. Leading college students in leadership training, mentoring, coaching, having them at my house for dinner, sleeping on my couch. I'm in the dorms, I'm in the fraternities, and I've done that for 8 years. And so the people that you are about to hire over the next decade or 2 decades and have been hiring, I'm spending countless hours with trying to equip them for the next stage of life. Our ministry is very much so focused on spiritual development in college, but equipping people to go into the workplace. The goal really isn't to send people into ministry, although some will. Most of the students, I want to be in your shoes someday, leading businesses, leading in their neighborhoods and their families. And so I'm getting a ground floor look at the people that you're going to be spending time with. Maybe a different way to think about it would be, what I want to do today is to kind of go on the factory floor and help you see what life is like there. Where are the students coming from? How are they being formed as people, as leaders, as thinkers? And how is that going to affect when you interact with them a few years from now? And so to kick us off, I want to tell a little fictional story, I suppose. And it's taken from one of these books, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which is a must-read book. I mean, for even outside of these purposes, I highly recommend The Anxious Generation. And Haidt tells this story as he tries to articulate why digital technologies have reshaped basically people who are my age, 30 and under, for all intensive purposes. And what he does at the beginning of that book is he lays out this fictional story of a group of kids who signs a contract on their own to live on Mars for a season. And they go about, and his purpose is basically to talk about how internet contracts start when you're 13, and it's inappropriate because of how much it will change you to go on the internet. But I want to alter the story a little bit, and I want you to imagine that we take a whole generation of American-born students and kids, and we send them to a different culture, whether that be sub-Saharan Africa or East Asia, and they have to be born there and raised there. And then 22 years later, you have to hire all of them. The government comes in and says, those are the only people you can hire starting this day forward. What are the issues that you're going to run into? If you've taken a sociology class in college or high school, you know that there's going to be language issues. There's going to be different values for how they think about commitment, how they think about time, how they think about what is important and what's not important, and how to determine those realities. Where do they spend their time? What is consuming their time? How are their anxieties coming out in their life, and where are they being produced from? Some of you have grown up in different cultures, have that experience by living in the Midwest, living in America. But what I might suggest to you is that some of you, you've spent time with your kids, your grandkids, or maybe that guy that sits in the cubicle next to you, and you've wondered, why are you so different? And I want to suggest to you that you're not crazy for thinking that. I think oftentimes people who are generations beyond the current generation, Gen Z, think to themselves, I'm probably the one that's just stuck in my ways. And maybe that's true. But what I want to suggest to you today is maybe there's something categorically different that happens with the introduction of digital technology, primarily your phone, that's what I'm talking about, and social media, that's changed the course of human development in a substantial way, unlike any course of development and change up to this point. And so that's the backdrop of what I'm talking about. And maybe the last kind of thought here before I get started, I feel like an intergenerational person for a simple fact is that all these books I'm talking about, all the research and the generation that I'm spending time with, they're in my generation. They literally talk, it's my dates, May or starting college in the fall of 2013, graduating May of 2017. That's me. That is exactly me. And so this stuff's written about me, but I had the privilege of being adopted and raised by my grandparents. And so I have a generational gap in parenting. I saw life differently as I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and I avoided some of this experience and exposure to technology into ways of thinking that have been so common to the current generation. So I feel like an insider and outsider to some degree because of those realities. And why I think this is important for you is a distinction that social commentator Andy Crouch makes between impact and legacy. For some of you who have started your businesses or own your businesses or are running your companies, who have important investments in the industries that you work in, is that you don't just want to have what Andy Crouch would call impact. And the way that maybe he would describe impact to be like this: taking a boulder and throwing it in a mud puddle. You can have a huge splash, but it's momentary. What many of you desire in your businesses and your lives and your families as you think about the next generation is something what I would call legacy. It's something that can't be measured this year. It can't be measured by the profits you gain in the next 5 years. It can only be measured maybe in the next 10 years, maybe the next 20 years, but probably long after you're gone and long after not only your successor, but many generations come after you. And what that could be akin to would be throwing a pebble in a large body of water. The ripple seems small to start, but if you can throw it out there, it can have a lasting impact over time. And so that's why I think it's important for you not just to complain about the next generation or kids these days. It's not just to cater to the tendencies you see in culture, but it's to understand it so you can address it properly. And so that's where we're going to go. The way I want to do this is address a few problems briefly, some more in detail, some more quickly, and then maybe a tentative solution in your shoes. I'm not a business leader, so some of these might be idealistic and not realistic for you in your current situation, but I want to paint the picture, give a tentative solution to address it, and hopefully it'll help, and I can address questions later today. So the first problem that I would bring up is what I would call the problem of a microwave world. To put it differently, we live in a ready-made world. A world where, as one book, Simplicity Parenting, would say, the toys tell kids what to do with them. And so if you give kids blocks, they have to build. If you give kids, my son loves Lightning McQueen, a Lightning McQueen cart does one thing. It says ka-chow. That's all the Lightning McQueen cart does if you have kids. That's it. And Chick Hicks, ka-chinga, ka-chinga, that's what he likes to do. But it only does that. It entertains you. If you give a kid an iPad, there's no thought, there's no creativity that comes with it. And, as many people would argue, if you monitor kids' play in recess time, so much so that there's ready-made what I would call referees, they never have to resolve problems on their own. There's no running around your bikes, getting in a fight with your friends, and then resolving your friendship. It's that mom's going to be there, the teacher's going to be there, someone's going to be there. It's a ready-made culture. I often spend time with students, and I share stories from high school because I was raised by my grandparents, so they let me do whatever I want, basically. They're just like, oh, you won't get in trouble, right? And so I have crazy stories from high school, some that I'm embarrassed by, some that are funny, and our students will sit in amazement like I lived some extraordinary life. And I said, no, it was just Delvin, Illinois. But what the difference is they think entertainment can only come when someone sends you to Topgolf, gives you an iPad, gives you something to do. And I think actually life happens when you're bored, when you have to create fun for yourself and figure things out. And so there's this ready-made culture that then translates into college of people being handed assignments, and they'll look at their professor and say, well, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And the professor gets frustrated and says, well, figure it out. And there's this back and forth to eventually the university setting often has capitulated to say, let's just make it the lowest hanging fruit possible. It's all online. All tests are open book. You can do this with your friends. Don't cheat. Wink, wink. You can actually cheat. That's how a lot of learning is happening. That's how jobs are had. That's how life is expected to be. And so that's leading to constant boredom, complaining about people that are leading them for not giving enough clarity or helping enough. People are later to get driver's license because they don't need to. If I have a phone, why do I need to go out? So there's this delay in development that causes problems in the microwave culture. And even to take it a step further, some of you probably use this if you respond to a lot of emails, but AI will even answer emails for you. And so students never even have to learn the tedious task of responding to an email in a professional way. AI can do that. And it's taking those basic chores of life that have developed many of us and many of you and strip them so they have no ability to actually solve problems, bring multiple solutions together. And I would say that that's a difficulty that must be overcome. My tentative answer to resolving this or addressing this particular issue would be what I would call clear and extended onboarding practices. And so in the work that I do, the constant complaint I would say that I get about my own leadership is a lack of clarity. And I need to learn from that. I can be a little big picture. I can miss the details sometimes. But I think there's also something to be said. Sometimes there's not clarity to be given. Sometimes you don't know what to do. And you can only figure it out 4 years from now, 3 years from now, after you do it. And I think there's this ready-made culture that says, give me exactly what I need to do, give me the exact outcome, and I'll do it happily. But when you give someone says, I don't know what this is going to end up, how it's going to lead, that leads to frustration. And so I think this is an issue you probably need to cater to on the front end and then raise your expectations on the back end. Catering on the front end for us looks like in campus outreach. And, when I came on staff, my onboarding process was 4 hours with my best friend who just got hired 6 months before me. And then we went and figured it out. No one told me what to do. And that was a mistake for sure. And it needed to be corrected, but now it needs to probably look like the first 6 months of coming on staff with a campus ministry probably needs to be overseen with a mentor. You probably need regular feedback and coaching and evaluations, and you need to have clear goals on the front end. So raising expectations too high early can lead to what Ian, I think, was talking about, is frustration, being overwhelmed, leading to some mental health issues, because you think, I don't have the skills necessary and no one's giving them to me. And so on the front end, I think you need to recognize that their development up to this point has led them in a vulnerable spot to probably not be very good at problem solving on the front end. And these are large scope, swaths. I mean, some people are obviously excellent students and develop people, but in large, this is the sense kind of from the ground floor. And so coaching will be necessary. Students, are not good at time management. You're going to need to sit down with them and help them schedule their weeks and be gentle and patient on the front end with those things while expecting them to grow in that over time, and we'll get to that. Problem two, I think my solution was financial viability. It's just a common idea, I think, that generations that are beyond me have, is that students and college students, especially if I read the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, people are very cause-driven. They want their work to have impact in the world. When I talk to my wife's uncle, he's a business leader in Chicago, he often recalls the story of two girls that were applying for his company, asked them, why do you want to be here? And he's appalled by what their answer was. They said, I just want to have work that's enjoyable and has impact. And he thought that was a ridiculous answer. He tells me that all the time. But I think it's easy to think, there's all these protests and social upheaval and all these things. So what are students concerned about? They want work that's meaningful. And I'm just here on the ground to say, people have always been concerned about money, and they're still concerned about money. Students probably more than ever are really worried about and overwhelmed with this concern of money because of how in their face it is. And their earliest memories are coming on the Great Recession, right? In 2008, 2009, that's when they were really, really little. And so my wife and her family have memories of her parents struggling, a dollar bill flying out the window and her mom like breaking into tears kind of thing. And I think a lot of students have that as a backdrop, so much so that they're constantly worried about money, even when it's present. A student I was talking to recently didn't take classes this semester because of how stressed he was about finances. He's just working. And then his grandparents just wrote a $20,000 check to cover it. I thought, why were you worried? Like, your family has obviously plenty of money. And it was just the general culture, or as a lot of people would say, the vibe. It's the vibe. And so the New York Times had an article about this. I've been thinking this for years, but I was happy to know that a larger source than me is also noticing these trends. It said, what do students at elite universities want? They want money. That's what they want. And so if I were in a business, I would want to outline to reduce turnover rates, not in contrast at all what Ian said, but I would want them to see how there's financial viability for a long term in your company, if it is there. A friend that I was talking to one time is in process of becoming a franchisee at a Chick-fil-A, and he said one of the draws was they told him that this would be the last job he would need, meaning there would be enough financial viability he would never need to look for work elsewhere. I think it's worth looking to say, can you offer that to people here locally? They don't have to go to Nashville. They don't have to go to Austin. They don't have to go to Orlando or New York. But is there financial viability? And what does the route to that look like? And what should the expectations be? A lot of students expect that financial success will come by the time they're 30, as Ian said, and for some of us, maybe it does. But the general path probably isn't that, and you need to help them understand that early. Financial success is probably going to come more long-term. And so that would be a consideration. Problem 3 for those of you in the tech industries and manual labor, a lot of students think college is boring and it's expensive. Their college enrollment rates are declining. Western's maybe at an all-time low right now. I could be off on that, but the numbers are low. And a lot of students don't know why they're there. A student a few years ago I was talking to, Curtis, he was a chemical engineer, and I looked at him and I said, what do you want to do with your chemical engineering degree? He said, I don't know. It's like, that's a pretty hard degree. And he looked at me dead honest, and he said, are you serious? I was like, oh yeah, that's going to be a tough 4 years for you. And he was like, I don't even know what I'm doing at college, man. And I was like, man, it's probably worth thinking about this. His dad was an engineer at a large engineering firm, very educated, very affluent, and he was considering going into a trades job. And I think that is more common. And if I were in the business place, I would think about, how do I even market to college students? I was talking to a student recently who's formerly in aviation, and he's going to finish his degree probably in business, but he's actually more interested in going into the trades. And so there's a lot of people caught in this in-between of feeling like I have to go on an education and not wanting to. And trades jobs are obviously important. So it's just worth thinking about. Problem 4, as a slogan, I would call, whatever doesn't kill you makes you, and for all of history, we've said, stronger. Yeah, that's right. In Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind, he says, whatever doesn't kill you, as the slogan goes in contemporary culture, or by implication, makes you weaker. There's a tendency to avoid difficulty and hardship. And the campus, it might look like this. I want to join a fraternity so I can party for my first 2 years, but I'm going to drop out by the time I'm a junior, and I'm not going to pay my dues, so the fraternity is going to go into debt. And there's not going to be any kind of a feeling of responsibility for that. Doing homework assignments, I don't really want to. It's too much. I'm too overwhelmed. I'm just going to call in sick to work tomorrow because I don't want to go, or I want to do this other thing. Even meeting people at a new social event. If I host an event on campus 10 years ago, I would say we averaged 100 to 120 people, not because things were more spiritual, but probably because people wanted to meet new people. The biggest barrier now is I don't want to risk in social situations. I don't want to go out with people I don't know to have new face-to-face interactions, so on and so forth. Whatever doesn't kill you, as the saying might go, makes you potentially weaker. Students are convinced that life today is harder than ever. Objectively, that's just not true. Just so you don't feel bad about yourself and you think that it is, trying to be empathetic, I really don't think that that's true at all. There's been much harder things happening in world history than what we're currently dealing with. Mental health has never been discussed more, and yet been more problematic. And so there's a correlation between those two things. It's really interesting. The more it's addressed, oftentimes, the more it goes up. And Abigail Shrier in her book, Bad Therapy, discusses that. I don't agree with everything she says. And as Ian said, those are important concerns. But it's worth considering why that's the case. And there's the sense that the financial pressures today are worse than ever. Again, objectively, that's probably just not true. Although they're challenging. As always, life is always challenging. And so if I were going to answer this, I would say the need in companies, in leadership, from people like you is clear values. The Jewish rabbi turned organizational theorist turned leadership guru, Edwin Friedman, talks a lot about this in his book, Failure of Nerve. But he tells a story in elsewhere to articulate these principles. It's called Friedman's Fables. And what he says in that book, he tells a story of a man who is really sensitive. And he has his nerves actually grow on the outside of his body. And his wife becomes the biggest culprit for offending him, making him upset, and doing those things because she's constantly stepping on his nerves. And so as Friedman tells the story, well, what's the answer? We often think in our culture it's, well, give him distance, if that makes sense. And what she said, or what he says in that book, is what she does to respond to it is she begins stepping on his nerves. And he's, it hurts. You offended me. In all of these things. And what I would say is your clear values are a way to kind of say, this is where we're going. Are you going to join us or not? I've set the direction. Will you come with? At times you need to cater, but I don't think it's worth coddling people. They need to be challenged to grow. You're the most mature person in your organization, hopefully. Call them to your maturity. In our organization, we often say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And that's an unfortunate direction for organizations to take. Let the healthy people get the attention and call people who are struggling to health and help them, as Ian said, in the ways that they need that. And so those are some thoughts about that. Lastly, just this idea that kids are raised on Mars. They need increased face-to-face connection interaction. Jonathan Haidt highlights the problem development through these four lenses. He said real relationships and human development comes through embodiment, through synchronous relationships, meaning when I talk to you, respond instantly. There's no delay. They're primarily one-to-one or one-to-several in their communication, not one-to-many, meaning online through social media. And they take place within communities that have a high bar for entry and a high bar for exit. That's real relationships. The way our relationships are structured in our day war against that idea. And so what I would suggest, being with students who are dealing immensely with, a minimum, I think the average is like 4 hours a day on technology. And so if you can see, that's more than a part-time job that people are spending on their phone. And I would suggest it's worth helping people recreate the water cooler moment at your workplace, connect with people in person if you can, especially if you can work and avoid remote work. I think you need to monitor tech use. People are doing bad things on their phone, if you don't know that. Very bad things on their phone. And I wouldn't want them doing that on my bill. And I would want to know what they're doing on their phone. And I would want to limit their work or their technology use to be about work. I would wonder how much burnout and overwhelmness is coming not because people are more stressed because work is harder, but because they have so many more inputs that they can't do anything about. Non-actionable inputs on their phone and social media. And so if you could limit that at least for 8 hours a day, you might actually see a greater increase in health and focus. And so I would want to monitor technology, and I would want to give people more increased in-person time. Well, to conclude, I just want you to avoid two dangers and pursue one goal. The two dangers would be this. The first is don't fall into the trap of just thinking, well, I wish things were just the way they used to be. The second danger, though, is not to just conform and say, it's just the way things are. The goal really is to ask yourself the question, what is the way that things could be? How could I leverage this generation with their problems, but also their strengths, and call them to maturity? We're in a culture that's focused and obsessed with youth, but I would say the biblical standard would actually be wisdom. The Proverbs say a gray hair is the crown of glory, and it's gained in a righteous life. And you have something that youth can never offer. It's experience, it's wisdom, it's living in the world, it's the weight of gravity weighing on you for years and decades. It's experience, it's input in industry, and those are things, as Ian said, if you have turnover in your companies, if you only focus on youth, all of that investment, all that knowledge will go lost. And so what students need as they're coming in the workplace, they need you. They need you to be who you are. I have a professor, I'll end here, who's been a theological educator for 30 or 40 years, and I just grabbed lunch with him the other day when I was in Orlando, and I knew it wouldn't really go anywhere because it never does, in my opinion, right? I'm asking him questions. I was asking him career, like, what do I need to do, Galotto? Like, what's my next move kind of thing? And he just tells stories. And I was like, I wasn't asking you that at all. He didn't answer any of my questions. And it was just like, where is this going? But what I realized, I need to be with him. He has character, he has experience, and clearly he's telling me these stories for a reason I just don't know yet. And I would say that your people, that the guy that you just hired in the cubicle next to you, the new hires that are frustrating you, they need you. They need you to be committed to your company's values and goals, and they need you to speak into the life of their mentor and their coaches. And so I care deeply about students, equipping them, developing them, and exporting them. And I consider, this talk and my ministry in connection to CBRT as a baton pass over to you to continue that work, to influence our community, to influence our region. And I would ask you just to consider, how can I understand this generation better, to hire them, lead them, develop them, and hand them off so they actually become a part of the legacy I'm developing. So that's all I've got. If you have questions, I'd love to connect with you after, but thank you.